Hey guys, Jen Glidden here, and I want to talk about a really important topic that I think holds a lot of people back from succeeding in their business, and that is how to deal with confusion. And so I think that what I'm going to share with you right now is actually going to be instrumental in you being able to develop a new way of growing your business, growing your life. This can help in any aspect of life, whether it's business, relationships, your personal decisions, whatever it is. This is a really critical concept, and I have only heard one person talk about it, but it was so valuable to me that I think that it will also be valuable to you. So let's get into it. First of all, your brain. Now, this is a concept that may be a little bit strange to consider, but you are not your brain, and there's a whole discussion we could have about that. But let's talk about how your brain functions by default. First of all, you may notice if you pay some attention that your brain always wants to have an answer. It wants to already know the answer. And it will jump to conclusions, it will jump to judgments to have that answer right off the bat. Now, once your brain jumps to a conclusion, it's a lot harder to go back and change that conclusion, right? Once your brain jumps to a conclusion or makes a judgment, then it starts only seeing evidence that will support that conclusion. So, people will talk about how if you buy a new car, then you'll start seeing that same car on the road way more than you ever did before. And that's the same sort of idea here, is that once your brain has made a decision about what it believes is true, then it's only really going to see evidence that supports that. So that's why confusion is such a challenge for our brains, right? And in school and in work, we're always supposed to have an answer, right? Not knowing is considered bad. So when we feel confused, we feel uncomfortable. We don't like it. Our brain tells us that we don't like it because our brain always wants to have an answer. That's its default. So when our brain says, I don't understand this, then oftentimes it'll just stop and turn around and either make a quick judgment so that it doesn't have to gain more understanding, or it'll just, move on to another topic. And when you're growing a business, there are things that are going to be really helpful to learn. Always new skills, the industries, things are always changing, whether you're online or offline. The marketplace is always changing. And so to be able to keep up and move forward, we always have to be learning. And so we have to consciously tell our brain, okay, this may be confusing, we may not understand it right now, but we can go ahead and start understanding it. We can embrace this confusion, because confusion is part of the learning process. And this is something that is not really taught. We're just by default, we kind of just slough off confusion and shut it down, but it's a very helpful process. So when you start feeling confused about something, there are ways to deal with it. There are ways to work through it that are going to benefit you so greatly on the other side of that confusion. Because when you feel confusion, you're not going to feel it forever. It's only temporary. And as you gain more understanding, then the confusion diminishes. Now, this is very different from your brain just jumping to a conclusion. Whether that conclusion is accurate or not, then your brain is building a whole framework based on that conclusion, and that could come tumbling down because it's not based on actual information and understanding. So you don't have to see the stop sign when you feel confusion. Instead, imagine that a door is opening, a door of possibility is opening for you to step through and start asking questions. So we can embrace the confusion phase. Now, while you're confused, it's helpful to poke around and gather information. Oftentimes, you can't hurt anything by kind of just poking around, looking in different places. If you're trying to figure out a new website system, maybe look through that back office and figure out, okay, what all is in here? There's a quick start guide, there advertising resources, there's ad tracking, there lead capture pages, autoresponders. You may not know what any of that is yet, but just taking a look around, kind of like standing on a hill and surveying where you are. Okay, you haven't been to those places yet. You haven't been into that little valley and walked next to the stream yet, but you see that there's a stream there. Okay, that's really helpful to know. That's where you'll be able to get some water down the road, right? When you need to drink because you're thirsty. So poke around, look around, start gathering information. Your brain is going to work on piecing together that information and making a new framework. And give your brain permission to not know everything, okay? This is a challenge for a lot of people because we are so conditioned to the way that the school system and then the work system works. Just so instead, give your brain permission to not understand everything, but to start looking around and to start figuring out some big picture and some smaller details. And as you start filling this in, you can take notes. That's really helpful. As you start filling in what you actually do know, then you're going to be able to understand. And the confusion is going to diminish because you're building on things that you actually know. So don't feel like you have to rush the process or anything. And even if you're starting at just square one, that is totally okay because that's how we learn. We have to learn from somewhere. So in terms of taking stock of what we know as we poke around, maybe something as simple as, I don't know how the internet works. I don't know how marketing works, but I know that when I type in a web address on my keyboard, then my computer will pop up that new website page, right? That's something you can know. What else can you know? I know that, if I move my mouse, then I can control the pointer on the screen. It may be something as simple as that. And then you build from there. So confusion leads to understanding when you are being intentional about the process. Don't rush the process of gaining understanding. It is not a race. Always, we will benefit more in the long run if we're seeking understanding than anything else, because understanding is what's going to help us create the results that we want. Now, when our brain defaults and just jumps to a conclusion so that it can be right, so that it doesn't have to go to the effort of building a new framework, then the consequences of what our brain thinks is right will not actually lead to the best outcome. Instead, Instead, it will lead to more difficulty and problems down the road. If you're allowing your brain to just jump to a conclusion that's not based on real information, then it's going to cause problems down the road. And that's why a lot of problems exist in our world today. But the difference is when you're seeking understanding all the time, then that's going to essentially create a smoother path for you to accomplish what you desire. So, you can create scenarios in your head of, let's say that there's a decision that you're trying to make, or you're trying to understand how to build a website, for example. Then if you just decide, oh well, I'm just going to do it this way, and you do it that way, well, you may be overlooking some things like site security, or the site may not work if you're trying to set it up for people to be able to click on things. If you don't get an understanding of how to create links and how to work with WordPress, for example, then if you just go in there and throw something up there, you may not be creating a website that actually works, and then people are going to visit it and they won't see the content that you created. They may be getting 404 errors or things like that. But when you take the time to develop an understanding of what you're doing, it can be little by little, but then you're building on a strong foundation that's actually going to get you to your goal. So figuring out, okay, this is how I use WordPress. This is how I can create a secure site. This is how I can add content and then link the content. And so when you work towards understanding, that's going to get you better results. So, to sum it up, confusion serves a purpose. It is working against your brain's default, but it serves a purpose in the learning process. And usually when you're starting a new business, you're learning a lot, and that is okay. And you will experience some confusion. But when you experience it, just stop, take stock of what you actually know, and then start poking around from there to figure out your next steps. It's not a race. It is instead a process of developing understanding and creating that framework. And then as you build your framework, the mental framework of understanding, then you're going to be able to fill it in with more details as you go along. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers before you even get started, because your brain isn't actually going to work it out that way. Instead, take action from where you are from the beginning, and that's going to help you gain more understanding. So I hope this video is helpful for you. I hope that it helps you move forward in your business, and be sure and get in touch with me if you have any questions that I might be able to assist you with, or resources I can point you to. You can visit my blog at jenniferglidden.com, and I appreciate your time.